Hello everyone, it's 2026 now, time flies. Let's start again. This time let's talk about facility management contract. I've been delivering a number of training courses to some clients to talk about facility management contract. You may wonder, if we have got a term service contract, why do we need an FMC contract, the facility management contract? Today I'm going to talk about 3 elements of it. There are more, but I just pick out 3 of them just to illustrate a point. Before I start, let me just make a statement. If you ask that question, what question? Why do we need an FMC contract if we've got an TSC contract? You probably are from the engineering and construction field. But if you ask an operator, if you tell them defects, they will look at you. They will look at you. Why? They don't understand. I mean, they do understand what you try to say, but it's not their language. And therefore, we say service failure. Service failure, they start to understand, it's the failure of the service or services that I have offered. So service failure. If you tell them, do some task for us, they may understand what you are talking about. For example, call center. You phone an operator up, can you do some task for us? But now, if you say service orders, they start to understand. It's an order to provide some sort of services for a certain client, for example. So this FM contract here is just trying to enhance some of the language so that the people using this contract in the facility management field will start to understand easier. It's more than terminologies. For example, number 1. Service orders. Service orders. Now, service orders are like some reactive services that we require the supplier, which we call the service provider in this contract, to provide. For example, one day when I was working in a certain office, I was organizing some events. I organized events, yes. The fire alarm suddenly went off, and then normally, I picked up a phone and then I called a certain engineer and said, can you just come? Can you just come? Because I got no way to turn it off, and the event is going to start in half an hour. So it was so disturbing, so annoying. Then everyone was like, well, what is happening here? Interestingly, the other side, the engineer, he said, now I understand this is an emergency. Thank you for calling. You know, that sort of language, that sort of tone. Can you fill in a form for us? And then I'm going to get my manager to approve your form. And then I'm coming in the next 2 days. I said, no, can you just come here or tell me what to do? Tell me the password, for example, because you set a password in, you don't allow me to turn that off. So how can that be? So there's sort of procedures. Who drafted that? It's an emergency. You are saying the engineer is coming in the next 2 days. It's an emergency. Okay, it's not the end of the world, but I need to get that sorted out. Now, that sort of procedures, logically, we will put that in the scope. Why? The scope in NEC, in this case, we say, is a document that specifies and describes the service that the service provider needs to provide. So, let's label that part of the scope or that chapter of the scope as service order requirements. They put that in the FMC. So you see, if you have something like that in the contract, then it's easier to understand. We don't have it in the TSC contract. In the TSC contract, yes, you do have tasks, you do have task orders, you do have something called the scope, but the language is not easy to understand for those people working in that field. So that's number 1, service orders. Number two, project orders. Now, projects means I want to construct something. For example, suddenly, within a certain facility management scenario, I want to construct an office building, a small one, 2 floors, and that's it. I don't want an extra ECC contract to build that thing. Can we just do it in one go? Then the FMC contract puts it as a secondary option. If the client has chosen to put that secondary option, then that facility management contract is allowed to add in a mini project, for example, construction of a small office building, for example. Then in that case, it's sort of like, well, incorporating part of the ECC, the engineering construction contract, simplify that a little bit, put that in the FMC contract, and please add in the program, because we need the program as in construction. Please add in a completion date, otherwise you have only got a service period, 1st of April to the end of March, and that's it, the service period. It doesn't work for a project. We need a completion date. And how about the assessment of the compensation events? Now we have delay to the completion date now. If you don't put that in the FMC contract, the FMC contract cannot construct an office building like this. So they put that into a secondary option, option X27. How about the term service contract? The term service contract has got tasks. Those tasks, if you read into that contract, is very similar to a mini project. But why do you call that a task? And by the way, an FMC contract, we don't expect every FMC contract to have a mini project like this. In the term service contract, they put that as a core clause. This part, if you put something in the core clause, it exists in every task service contract. And that doesn't make sense for many of the facility manager outside. And therefore, instead of using a core clause in term service contract and call that a task, let's properly call that a project and put that in the secondary option X27, and let's call that a project order. And it's optional. And it makes more sense for many of us. So, if we think about this, many of the principles in the term service contract I should say all of them are in the facility management contract under NEC 4. But a facility management contract is an enhanced version of a term service contract, mainly to put the focuses on the soft FM side. Many of you know, okay, facility management, we have hard FM, you have soft FM. Hard FM, mainly talking about repair and maintenance. Soft FM, we are talking about services, for example, cleaning. For example, providing catering services, for example. So that is number 2. Number 3 now. Number three, let's talk about mobilization and demobilization plan. In the facility management field, demobilization is quite a thing. Why? After all the services that I've provided, well, I need to hand over something back to the client. How about the plan? How do I move out? What is the handover procedures here? By what time, when, and what, and how, and who, and all these. And therefore, in the FMC contract here, they put in the demobilization plan as an extra requirement, and it is mandatory for the service provider to submit to the service manager. If you go to the TSC contract, you don't have it. Some of us would like to have a mobilization plan. In fact, even for term contract is quite common. The FMC contract here, they put it as an optional requirement. It's not a secondary option, it's still in the core clause, but it's an optional requirement. If the client wants it, then they specify that in the scope, then the service provider needs to provide, or should I say submit, the mobilization plan to the service manager for acceptance. So things like that. So one final reminder here is, you may ask, well, we have a term service contract, we have a facility management contract, which one to choose then? Now the answer is, it really depends. If you're talking about the soft FM side, then I would say the FMC contract will make more sense, especially when you are talking about the practitioners in the facility management field. Then an FMC contract in the NEC is more sensible in terms of the language and the arrangement that it tries to provide. One more reminder is that if you are working in the UK here, the public sector is recognizing the FMC instead of the TSC. The public sector in the UK, the Crown Commercial Contract, what is that? The Crown Commercial Service frameworks, they recognize FMC contract, not the TSC contract. That is another consideration if you are working in the public sector. Because recently I talked with some of the government officials in the UK in the construction industry and the facility management industry as well. There are many other things that I can talk about. For example, different terminologies. The KPIs, how do you set the KPIs? There are different things, service failures, the way to manage service failures. How exactly should we deal with a certain failure if the service provider has already gone past the time to provide the service, to correct that service, for example. So leave that to the expert or leave that to the training courses. You may see me one day, I don't know. If you see me, just say hello. I use this YouTube mainly to supplement my training services to many of the clients. I hope these are useful. If you want me to talk about anything else, let me know, okay? Let me know, mainly NEC, of course. I hope we will meet each other soon, and I hope these videos are useful for you.